Awesome. Well, I might kick things.
It is with dealing with
Sincere thank you to all of our beekeepers who have dialed
government speak. We've tried to make
my sincere thanks as well to Rob from Biosecurity Queensland and our fearless peak industry body leader, Danny. Today, I just want to start off, first of all, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country that we're all meeting from collectively, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. First of all, the run of today, we're going to keep it fairly casual, fairly laid back. So the plan is that Danny's going to take us through a national update, first of all, walk us through what's been going on in the New South Wales response, and bring us up to speed with what's happening there. Then we'll move over and listen to Rob. Rob Stephens is going to provide us with an overview of what's going on within the Queensland space at the moment. Rob will cover off on some statistics for us. Rob's also going to take us through the varroa mite surveillance wash program and drone uncupping program. So that huge varroa mite surveillance operation that we've kicked off at the beginning of April. And
parts of the state, but it's
the results that are coming in. So my sincere thank you to every beekeeper that has been actively contributing, getting out there in the field, looking for varroa, testing for varroa, and reporting your results, because you guys are absolute champions. So anyway, from there, Danny, I might hand over. Just before I do, we have got a Q&A option, so please feel free to throw any questions that you've got in there. Otherwise, the plan for these toolboxes is to keep them really casual. So if you've got a question, try and hold it off to the end, and we'll address them. Both of our speakers are more than happy to try and answer any questions that you've got to the best of their ability. If we can't answer them collectively, we're going to pull back and we'll find the answers for you and get that sorted out hopefully for next week. So yeah, let's get cracking. Toolbox Fridays. Grab yourself a drink, and Danny, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Just getting myself organised there. So should be able to see it on the screen. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction there. I'm Danny Lefebvre. I work for the Australian Honeybee Industry Council. I've been heavily involved in the varroa response from day dot during
consignment.
Still involved every day in the response, in attending IMT meetings and being a sounding board for a lot of the guys in there. We now luckily have Bianca Giggins on board, who will be online a bit later in the meeting. She we've been able to get funding for her through the Department of Ag, the federal department, to assist in the varroa response and act as a industry liaison in there as well. So that's been really beneficial. So during the response, we've managed to double the size of AHBIC from 1 employee to 2. So hopefully that has resulted in a few more comms coming out. So just going to run you through the response and where we're sitting at the moment. So we're currently sitting on 153 IPs. Now, IPs are infested premises. That's what we refer to when they find a mite, whether it be in 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 hives on that apiary. It's just referred to a single premise. So there's 153 premises at the moment. Currently, there's about 200 response staff on the ground in the Newcastle varroa response. Interestingly, they've moved what were secondments, so they're being dragged in from every part of the department into the response, and there was a high turnover of staff, which was creating issues in continuity. They're now more what they call program staff that are on contracts, more permanent, and which has been great to be able to get a bit more consistency in the response and the way they're operating. There is the State Control Centre, which is based in Orange in New South Wales. That was face-to-face. It went remote and that didn't work for them, so they've brought it back, and now it's all face-to-face again in Orange. There's 4 forward command posts, or FCPs, being at Tokal, Taree, Nana Glen, and down south at Warimba. And that's where all those teams, the 200 staff, base themselves or launch themselves off before they go out into the field to do their surveillance. So the surveillance around the response. So the DPI have now conducted surveillance on 37,500 hives across all the zones, including the blue zones right across the state. Now, of that 37,500 hives, 20,000 of those hives have been with sticky mats and strips. So a large proportion now are strips, which is great. The strips and mats have been deployed right across all the zones, including the blue zone. So part of having the more permanent staff is they're rotating them back to their home base every few weeks. And when they're back at the home base, they're doing surveillance in and around their home base. So some of those are at Dubbo or Orange or Wagga, all around New South Wales, and they're doing surveillance on hives randomly through the blue zone. And that's an aim to try and keep that blue zone freedom paper current. There's a real big focus at the moment on DCP, so dangerous contact premises, and traces to make sure that they've cleared them. So every new detection they have, they investigate it and see what connections it has, and they look for that, and then they go and check to make sure that those traces and those DCPs are cleared with strips and mats. And so there's a focus on making sure with all the new detections we've had that all those connections have been cleared, and obviously so far they've been good. So detections. The detections, we've seen a huge flurry of detections in the last few months, which could be concerning for many. But I'll just walk you through that flurry in detections and sort of break it down a bit more. The reason that we've seen, a big gap in detections and then all of a sudden a flurry is because the teams that were on euthanasia, they finished euthanasia and then were moved all at once off of euthanasia, which is on night shift, into surveillance in the purple zones, and that can be as many as every day. There's sort of 6, 7, up to 10 teams on the ground in Newcastle. So we've gone from not a lot of surveillance in the purple zone to a whole heap of it happening in a hurry, and as a result of that, they've been finding some new detections. Now it's not unexpected. That's the whole point of having a purple zone ring around the red zone is a buffer to find any mites that were missed either in the initial surveys or mites in the initial times that were very low densities and now just getting to populations that they can detect in. So they are finding some of those. But I said there's a big flurry of detections. Not all of those have been purple zone detections, right? So a lot of those have been deep in the red zones and haven't changed zones at all or had any impacts, but have still been reported as IPs. So any hive that has a varroa mite detection has to be reported as an IP. And that's what you guys see coming through in the media as infested premises. So I often get the question as well, why are they finding mites in red zones? We thought all the bees should be dead in those zones. So it takes a bit of time when you're doing strips and mats, not like alcohol washes, which is pretty instantaneous results. The strips and mats are going to be put in a couple of days later, they're taken out, then they're accumulated in a freezer. Enough of them then go down to the lab tests them under the microscope, and then those results are going to be uploaded into their database, Max.
So the next one is
and then EDMs, electronic messages sent out to all those beekeepers in those zones. And so there's quite a lag. Quite a lag in those periods. So when they were tested and they originally were actually in purple zones and now become in red zones. But having said that, there are some new detections that are deep in those really old red zones too. And so some of those are hives that haven't been reported, aren't registered.
Yes, we really want you to ring the
hives that have been or feral colonies that have been tested by tracing and epidemiology to further understand the spread of the mite and how it's moving through the environment. So some of those deep in the reds have been done just as a data gathering exercise, but again, because they test and find a positive detection, has to be reported as an IP. So it keeps coming up as additional IPs. So the vast majority of those IPs have not caused any increase to the zones. The ones in the purple zones that we do worry about, they're the ones that they have been finding that's causing extension to the zones. Now they have been right on the edge of the purple and red zones, so they've been working through those purple zones from the outside in, getting towards the end of that now, finding some of those really low populations of mites, and then they've been going positive. Now, what has been
got anything suspect, give the call center.
Have been able to link all of those new detections, so they're all still explainable. They're all linked either back to other IPs or operations, or they've been very close to existing IPs, so it's natural spread to those. So I see a lot of stuff in the media lately saying, the mites are on the march across New South Wales, and so
some way we can contact you
on the march. These low detection, these low population detections, like I said, are not unexpected. They're linked. We understand how they got there, and it's part of the process of going through surveillance. But to be absolutely sure and clear that the mites aren't on the march, the DPI have put a big effort on the very southern sector of the response in doing a huge effort in strips and mats to make sure that there's nothing missed down there. And I've got some maps to show you, but they've put a big trench along the bottom of the response to ensure that it hasn't gone into Sydney at all. And they've all come back negative. So there's really good confidence that it hasn't spread south any further than what it is. And that the detections that we had been finding on the southern ends were as a result of equipment being moved or connections to other IPs and those sorts of things. So euthanasia. Euthanasia, so far there's been about 23,000 hives destroyed across all the red zones. There's still about 3,000 hives in those new red zones outstanding, which the teams are still working through euthanasia of that. And there's been a slight shift in the plan of euthanasia for those hives in those red zones. So what they're doing previously was the DPI were doing all the euthanasia of all the hives in a red zone until they got every single last one before they'd start baiting. Now, that was taking a long time between detection and baiting. So what they're trying to do now is expedite it and make sure the baiting occurs quicker. And so what they're doing, any hives on in an apiary where there's 10 or more hives, the DPI are euthanizing those because they can get through them quickly and do a lot of those apiaries in a day. Where there's apiaries that are 10 or less hives, so the 1s and 2s and 3 hives, they're allowing the beekeepers to do south euthanasia if they want to keep the equipment. If they don't want to keep the equipment and don't want to euthanize themselves, then the aim is the fipronil baiting program will then take up those smaller number of hives. And this is it's not necessarily something we've agreed with, but that's the plan they've got in place at the moment. And what that does mean, though, is that they can get the baiting occurring quicker in those areas, which hopefully gives us a bit better head start. So it puts me onto the baiting. The baiting now, there's about 550 bait stations deployed across the zones, and I've got a nice map to show you where they all are. And that's been a huge effort to get that many bait stations out. There's still a lot more to go out, and probably about half of those have been active so far. There's been mixed bag in terms of the uptake. So different areas have had different rates of uptake of the baits, and we've had different rates of success. So around Newcastle, around where the original IPs were, early on there wasn't great uptake, but now there's really good uptake in the Newcastle area, which is great. Across to the western sectors, being Denman and Jerry's Plain, also have had really good uptake of baits through there. And down the southern sector, the Calgary, Wine, Summersby area, there's also been really good uptake of baits for a while. Where there hasn't been good uptake, Nana Glenna and Coffs Harbour has had a honey flow there, so they haven't been really taking up a lot. But having said that, they've still been able to get to the threshold, so they need 300 bees per minute in the bait station before they can bait, and they've been achieving that at Nana Glen even with a honey flow, but not as much as we would like up there. They've been doing a lot of work around the efficacy of baiting. But they've had Ben Aldroyd down there doing ballooning for drones to assess the feral bee, try and estimate the feral bee populations. They've also been doing monitoring of those feral colonies to see the mortality of it, and they've been getting really good mortality of those feral bee colonies as quick as
no, he's fantastic.
in 2 weeks. They've been seeing the majority of the ones they've been monitoring dying, which is good. And Jay asked me to put some good news stories in there, and some funny stories that have happened. The baiting team have really struggled to get into some of this terrain to get bait stations out, and the other week I saw a photo where they seconded a fisheries boat, and there they are in the fisheries boat going up the Hawkesbury River with their bait station, looking to try and deploy those bait stations into those completely inaccessible areas by vehicle, and that just shows you the effort they're going to make sure they've got everything covered off. So there's a number of bait stations now that are only serviced by seconded fisheries boats. So that's been quite an experience for those guys. They've also, we get a lot of feedback about the bait stations killing everything and causing a lot of trouble. So the bait stations are using a very, very low rate of fipronil, lower than your average dog flea collar, in fact, that you put on there. And it's such a low rate that it doesn't kill the hives outright. It creates enough injury on those feral bees that over time they just don't reproduce and slowly die out unless they've really hit the bait station hard. It takes them quite a bit of time to die out. What that means is we're not seeing, and they've been monitoring those feral bees, not seeing hives being robbed that have died. They also stand at the bait stations to monitor the bees coming in and out, because they only put the bait in there for an hour and they stand there and watch it, and they're not seeing any other off-target species. So no native bees, no dragonflies, no butterflies hitting those bait stations up for the syrup as well. So they're very confident that it is working on the target species. We're seeing some anecdotal evidence come in that it is working on honeybees and not affecting other bees. There's been some videos taken where the honeybees are just absent, but there's a huge amount of other insects flying around pollinating or taking nectar off of the local trees. But having said that, we've been under a lot of pressure lately with the social license around baiting. So there's been a strong social media campaign by members of the public, as well as some face-to-face campaigning to try and slow up the baiting and spreading a lot of misinformation around about the baiting program without actually coming and asking the questions of the department. We'll touch on compliance. So compliance, there's been around about 60 compliance reports made. 28 of those have been in the last month. So the DPI embedded an investigator and a couple of compliance officers into the actual response instead of relying on the compliance department. And that's really ramped up the compliance. So there's been a number of fines issued. There's been a whole heap of warnings issued, and they've mainly been around hive movements and alcohol washing. So the police are now on board, and they've modified the emergency order, which means that beekeepers have to carry their movement declaration paperwork or their movement permit in their trucks, either electronically or on paper. And if they can't, the police can issue with an on-the-spot fine of $2,200 and return to sender. So they turn the truck around and send it back to where it came from, and they escort it there. And so the police are on board with that now. So hopefully, better late than never.
Moving into
We would have liked to have seen that happen a lot earlier, but at least it's occurring now, and we're seeing that ripple effect happen through a lot of those areas where beekeepers are talking to each other and realising that there's much more higher presence of compliance. Borders, I think Joe's going to talk about borders a bit later, but the Victorian borders now open, and the Queensland borders, they still have a lot of conditions. You still got to comply if you're moving out of New South Wales with the New South Wales regulations, then comply with the state you go into, whether it's Queensland or Victoria, you've got to comply with their regulations. So if you're going to move hives, make sure you're aware of the regulations and check it out. And I know Joe's going to talk about it a bit later from Queensland perspective. And the last one I'll touch on is the CCEPP. So that's a Consultative Committee for Emergency Plant Pests, and that is the committee that assesses all the technical data that comes out of the response and then makes recommendations to the National Management Group about the response, and they are the decision makers. So AHBIC's a signatory to the deed and sits on that CCEPP, as well as 26 other industries and government parties on that. So it's a big group full of experts, and they pour over the information. So it's been really good, and that meets ad hoc when it needs to, but has been meeting pretty regularly over the Varroa response. It's the same system across many responses. So every meeting of the CCEPP, they go around the room and ask for a vote on the technical feasibility of eradication. And so far in every meeting, it's been unanimous and strongly supported to be technically feasible, keeping in mind that these guys are the ones that get all the information, the technical data put before them. So they're getting the full gamut of the information, not just what comes through the media. And that always gives me great confidence, because some of these guys have been 30 years in biosecurity responses. They know their stuff, and they're still strongly supportive, which is great. They're currently working on the next version of the response plan, which hopefully will carry us through to the end of the response in 2026. There's a workshop in Canberra next week to really deep dive in that response plan and try and nail it, and hopefully we can get agreement to fund that through to the end. And on the funding, we've been able to get the recategorisation set, and as of the 10th of February. Now, what does recategorisation mean? Now, that means that determines what proportion of the bill for this response is paid by who. So prior to 10th of February, it was a category 3, which means it's a 50-50 split between government and industries. So 16 industry parties and the rest of them government out of the 26. It was an even split in paying the bill. Now that we've got it recategorised to a category 2, it's an 80-20 split. So the government's paying 80% of the bill, industries are paying 20% of the bill. So that means the honeybee industry will be up for around about 1.1% of the total bill that's coming here. And so we've got to put that in perspective too. We are not the lowest payers, but we're certainly not the highest. So almond industry, apples, grains, they're all paying more than we are for this response, which is great. Shows the system is working and we're not going to have to pay this off just ourselves for the next 10 years. So that's my little spiel done. What I'll show you now is some of those graphics, some of those maps. So the yellow dots are all the strips and mats that have gone out that have come back negative. Black crosses are positive. So obviously the black ones are in around Newcastle, and all those yellow ones, it's just to show that, and these are the ones done by the DPI, obviously, because beekeepers can't do it at this stage. So this is where the DPI has been doing it. And I talked about down the Sydney area. You go back probably a month ago, there's a big blob here that wasn't there. So they've really put a big effort into ensuring that that southern sector is clear.
Out later on this afternoon with
what I didn't mention actually, which is also really important, is they're estimating that by the middle of next month, middle of May towards the end of May, that they will finish the first round of surveillance. So that means statistically they have been through enough hives through the purple zones to give them that 99% confidence that they have contained it, like there's no more in the purple zone, and that it's all within red zones. So you know, the people that are doubting the response and the possibility of eradicating because of all those new detections, hold your breath for the next 2 or 3 weeks and we'll know. If we can get to 2 or 3 weeks and that's the point, we know how big this response will be, and that will be perhaps a decision point or a point where we can say, right, we know it's inside these red lines now, let's get onto it. All these blue crosses are the alcohol washes that have been done by beekeepers. And so these are the ones that have been done either to be able to move bees or part of the 16-week mandatory alcohol washing now. And that just shows just how much and how good a spread we've got of the alcohol washes across New South Wales. And those big gaps are just total billy goat country where people don't have bees. So we're up to around about 6,000 alcohol washes cases done, and it's still not enough, but it's starting to move and get to the point. And this is what they're basing the blue zone freedom on, a combination of those strips and mats and the alcohol.
he was back in service. So.
And the confidence that it's not out in the broader New South Wales area and that it really is confined within the zones. The last map is showing just the Newcastle area, and it's showing all the blue dots and yellow dots are bait stations deployed. The yellow dots are bait stations that have had fipronil spiking done to them. And so that's, like I said, 300 bees per minute have to come to the bait station, then they'll spike it with a dose of, they remove the sugar syrup out of it and they replace it with sugar syrup spike.
.gov.au,
and then remove that bait and replace it again with the straight sugar syrup. And so you can see a lot of these blue ones that haven't been spiked are in newer red zones, or like the Singleton area, places where they haven't really had the bees robbing at the stations because they've been on pretty good honey flows. Some of these new zones through here are just recently deployed bait stations, and these were also recently deployed down the southern sector. But you can see there's been good uptake there, good uptake through the centre of Newcastle, and they're really pushing out through the salt ash sort of area now as well with new bait stations and getting good spiking. And that's it for me, Joe. I probably went 15 minutes instead of 10. Sorry,
Danny. Thank you so much. It's really exciting. I think that QBA and AHBIC can collaborate together effectively to give these updates, and I'm hopeful that we can have a check-in with you every couple of weeks and just check in how the program's going and how the response is going. But definitely from the perspective of the QBA, we really pay a big thanks to you, the team at AHBIC. You've been doing a marvellous job. It has been a Herculean effort. We can put our hands on our heart, especially our QBA board, because it's we've ridden the
was still technically feasible to eradicate.
Separated geographically, but thank goodness we've got this virtual capacity that we can all meet online and check in. So my sincere thanks. Everyone on board. Danny's going to be around for a little bit longer to field any questions that you might have. So feel free to, again, pop them in the chat. If you like, put your camera on as well when you're asking the questions, because this is a toolbox environment. It's like a talk around the tailgate of the truck. This is what we're looking for, is to get that engagement with you. You know, let us know about things that you've got concerns on at the moment, and it really does help us to, you know, steer practical consultation, particularly with government and other industry bodies. So, you know, make sure you use that opportunity. Now I'm going to hand over to the one and only Rob Stephens. A lot of our Queensland beekeepers will be very familiar with Rob. Rob led a couple of incredibly successful eradication programs in Townsville, and Rob is currently our program manager of the Varroa Mite Prevention and Preparedness Program in Queensland. This is a program being funded by the Queensland government itself, and it's really critical that our beekeepers are participating in this program, in this effort, by going out there, doing your checking. The more confidence that government can have by people investing in this operation, it really paves the way for future investment in our sector, which I think is really important to make sure that we don't understate that. There's a lot of challenges out there, not only from Varroa mite. We want to continue to keep advocating for practical policies that support our industry and practical programs that can help build our industry. So getting on board with the Varroa mite program is really giving government that confident tick that we are passionate about preserving our future. Rob, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Joe, and thanks to QBA for initiating this series of talks. Our intention is to be available for you guys for the coming weeks, so we'll touch off on hive testing and the autumn blitz this time around, and then we'll try and have a session on permitting next time, or record keeping, but we'll try and have about 3 or 4 of these over the coming Fridays, so looking forward to it. And thanks to Danny for that really comprehensive update on what's going on in the New South Wales response. Queensland would like to acknowledge the significant work that New South Wales is undertaking throughout the response to date down there, and we thank AHBIC for their significant contribution to the program, and also big thanks to QBA for their contribution to Queensland's preparedness program. So we couldn't do this without industry support, and it's been really vital to get where we are today. So like Joe said, since the response happened in New South Wales, Queensland has stood up a significant prevention and preparedness program in Queensland, and that's to protect your industry and the plant industry is relying on honeybees for pollination. So if Varroas were to get a foothold, we suspect that it would result in about a $70 million per year if it became established in Queensland, in Australia, I should say. So to date, there's absolutely no evidence that it exists in Queensland, and we want to keep it that way, and that's where we're leaning on you guys for your support to get that negative data. So just a brief snapshot of the industry in Queensland. So there's about 9,700 beekeepers presently, and they have about 157,000 hives. So majority of the beekeepers in Queensland are hobbyists. So there's upwards of about 72% of them that only have 1 to 4 hives. So obviously our target today is the commercial side of the industry. So you guys are only a small cohort of people, but you're a significant one for us, and that's where we've really got to make sure we're getting our messaging right, and you guys understand what we're asking of industry. So the industry is spread out as well, so it's not all based in the southeast. We do have rather large clubs all up and down the coast, and obviously a lot of commercial beekeepers are quite nomadic, and they transit throughout the state and interstate as well. So what Queensland is doing as of April is launching an autumn testing blitz. So we're asking all beekeepers to monitor their hives and report their negative results, because we need our negative results to claim that freedom. So Danny's been talking about freedom from a New South Wales perspective. We need the exact same thing here in Queensland. We need enough data to come in to prove that Queensland doesn't have Varroa mite. So it's still a little bit up for debate, but it's thought that the mite might have been around the Newcastle area for but anywhere between 6 and 18 months. So early detection is vital in fighting this pest. So what we're asking for is beekeepers to go out and test their hives. Now we've tried to simplify this ratio. So I'll go into this in a bit of detail this time around, which I didn't in the webinar the other night. So what I want to stress to start with is we're not asking beekeepers to go out and test every single one of their sites at this ratio. We're asking that all those beekeepers that are commercial in nature, and there's about 700, the only way in Queensland, if every one of those beekeepers went out and tested one of their sites at the appropriate ratio, we'd be 95% of the way to having 95% confidence that we are free of the mite. So if you want to go and test additional sites at 10% or whatever other ratio, that's because that's the cream on top. That's negative data that we'd really appreciate. Any testing you do at all, even if you only test one hive, we would love that data to be submitted to the B123 app, and we'll try and drop that link in the chat so you guys have access to that form. If you haven't, hopefully all beekeepers in Queensland have seen this form by now. They might not have used it as yet, but you should be aware of this form. So if you've got between 1 and 100 hives, you should be testing about 48 of them. If you've got between 100 and 250, 55. And if you got over 250, 62. So again, if each one of those commercial beekeepers did one round of testing at that rate, we would be nearly the whole way there to our proof of freedom data. So, and then next time in 16 weeks, you test another site at that appropriate ratio. So like I said, we've simplified this a bit. This is the sort of raw data that our biometricians are basing this on, and this is where it all comes from. It's based on science. So we need the testing done at these ratios. We've rather than having beekeepers need a calculator to figure out how many hives they need to test, we've simplified that into three cohorts of hives, and that should be simple for you. But again, we'll take any data we can get. So it's just really important that if we want to claim 95% freedom, that we've got about 15,000 hives, 500 unique entries tested over the next 16 weeks. So this is all based on the World Organization of Animal Health and what they require and this is to say that you don't have a 5% prevalence at hive level and 1% at apiary level. So I won't get too bogged down in this, but basically the Queensland data up till now hasn't been enough to get to that 95%. So all the surveillance that has been submitted both by our department and by industry, we're only about 85% confident at the moment, or we were at the start of April before this campaign took place. So like I said, that negative data is key. We need people to be reporting their results through the B123 system. Negative results are just as important as positive, because we need that data. So the hive testing, like I said, if you're going out and you're testing hives, I'd recommend that beekeepers mark them. And then if you are testing only a proportion of your hives, next time you do the test different hives than what you tested the first time around. So eventually you're going to cover all the hives within that apiary. So this approach is going to get you to that 95% even quicker. So you'll get there in a shorter amount of time. So basically, this is all just us weighing up the needs of industry to the needs, what we need scientifically to prove that we are free of varroa in Queensland. So I know it gets a little bit confusing. There's a lot of numbers thrown around, especially for beekeepers that are dealing with multiple jurisdictions. Unfortunately, the testing requirement for pre-departure is a different hive ratio to proof of freedom testing. But today we're just going to be focusing on the proof of freedom. It's only a small amount of beekeepers that are applying for permits, and we individually case manage those beekeepers, and we're happy to walk people through the pre-departure testing. It's just slightly higher, that they need to do about 64 hives before they can move hives into Queensland. So again, to date, up until April, we had about 544 submissions, and we only had about 5,500 hives checked. So that wasn't quite good enough, and like I said, only got us to that 84% level of confidence. So that's why in April we've launched the the Autumn Blitz testing campaign. Officially, it kicked off on the 17th of April, which is only about 10 days ago. And since then, we've already had 99 submissions. So we've had about 1,500 hives checks, and we're about 10% of the way there. So we're backdating this as far as the 1st of April, but like I said, really the campaign only really started on the 17th of April. So I really I'm grateful for the beekeepers that have contributed their data, and I'm just really calling on all commercial beekeepers to get out and do their part, because we need more beekeepers to join the fight. 84% isn't good enough. If we want open borders and we want free hive movement and freedom in Queensland, we need to get that up to 95% and keep it there. So excuse me, another thing I will commend beekeepers on, though, is more people are participating in the alcohol wash now. So the data's in, and sugar shakes aren't good enough. So we're quite happy to receive drone uncapping seasonally. That's a very valid test, and I'd encourage all beekeepers to do that opportunistically when they've got the drone brood present. But alcohol washing is key. So I know a lot of people don't like the risk, especially it's more the recreational beekeepers that aren't as confident in their bottom box and they're at risk of taking their queen out. But we really would expect that commercial beekeepers should be doing alcohol wash as opposed to sugar shake. The other thing I wanted to just briefly touch on today is if you do have multiple sites, it's about assessing your own risk. So if you've got 10 sites and some of these sites are more used for pollination, that's probably the one you want to test at that higher level. So this map just sort of demonstrates the network of beekeepers that we have in southern Queensland over the border into New South Wales. So this is quite out of date too. This is from 2008, but you can just see all the connections and all the beekeepers that are moving around that part of the country. So that's why it's really, really important that you are going and testing these hives, because you don't know who's next door to you, what movements they've been making, what they're exposed to. So you've got to get in and you've got to be testing on that regular 16-week cycle to address that risk. And we'll cover this off in future Toolbox, where we'll go into the record keeping and the permitting side of things as well. But just really want to get beekeepers to think about what hives they've got that are at most risk, and they're the ones they should be testing at that higher ratio. Again, I'll save some of this for next time when we move on to permitting, but we are trying to simplify it for beekeepers. We understand how it is with dealing with multiple government organisations and trying to understand government speak. We've tried to make this plain language, so when we do deal with beekeepers and we issue a permit, we try and give them some plain language checklists that they can go through as well, just to make sure beekeepers are ticking off every single requirement before they make that move into Queensland. So we realise that some mistakes might be unintentional, and we just want to make sure beekeepers have it in plain language what their requirements are moving forward. I don't think we need to go into the alcohol wash testing itself today, but I do want to just really reinforce that testing now is the first step. We need to test again in spring, and then you need to test again in summer. So if you're testing every 16 weeks, you should be submitting at least 3 rounds of testing per year. So that's for us is going to be April, August, and December are those months that you have to remember, but I won't make you sing it this time, Joe. But yeah, and that's easy to remember for you guys. So basically, if you get in there those 3 months, and you'll opportunistically, you'll have the drone brood available in those other 2 times of year as well, in spring and summer. This isn't the ideal testing right now. It is cooling off in most parts of the state, but it's now or never. We really need beekeepers to get in there and start getting these testing numbers up. So I think most of you guys should know how to construct a container by now. It's really simple. Just got to be about 100 mil high, 100 mil wide. You want 2 lids, or you can drill that out if you don't have mesh. A lot of the beekeeping clubs have been sourcing them from commercial options now as well. I know QBA has made some. We plan on making some more. If you want some information, you can go on our eHub, and we should drop that link in the chat as well. So it gives a little bit of info on how you'd make that container. Again, I think most beekeepers know where the alcohol wash is meant to be now. It's in those middle 3 frames of your bottom box. So that's where your nurse bees are more likely to have the varroa. I mentioned before about marking your hives as well. If you've got a load of bees, you want to make sure that is representative of your whole load. So don't just test 10 hives that are close together. Get in there and test in the middle layers and make sure you're getting a decent sample of that load of bees. Don't always take the easy option and just test the 20 hives on the outside. We need to have an accurate representation of that consignment. It brings us to the survey form. Again, I'm hoping most people have seen this form by now. You can scan that QR code, or you can go to our eHub and click on the online form. You can download the ArcGIS Survey 123 app as well. So that the benefit of that is you can do offline data entry. So if you do have APRI sites that are outside mobile range, you can take the app with you, input the data, and then as soon as you get back in service, it'll submit. So they're both identical in how they look. I'll quickly just show you the form again, hoping most people have seen this. So it's 3 basic levels of data entry. We just need the date, what kind of beekeeper you are, your hive identification number, the purpose of your test. So most people are going to be doing a hive health check. Again, when the warms up in summer, we would expect beekeepers who are collecting swarms to be testing a proportion of their swarm. It's about protecting yourself. You don't know where that swarm came from, what its health status is. Get in there and test it. And also there's options there if you're doing permit related movements as well, if you're leaving Queensland or entering Queensland. In terms of your site location, this is an important one for us. It's a live field, so you can start typing the address in. It'll auto-populate and you can choose it. If you don't know your exact location, you can type the address you know is closest, and then you can actually move the pin. So once you start typing the address, that'll get you there, then you can move the pin. And that might be helpful as well if you're on a large rural property and you know exactly where the hives are on that property. You can drop the pin exactly where they are. So there is an extra little detail here that's sort of specific for Asian honeybee surveillance, and we thank our colleagues up in Cairns again that they sample Asian colonies and they do negative data on that. So that's really valuable negative information for us as well to prove that another infestation of mites hasn't come through the Asian bee population in the known infested area. So if anyone wants more information, they can click on the link and see the KIA map. It's roughly Daintree to Cardwell at the moment. So how many hives you've got at the site, and then how many of those hives you're testing. So again, if you've got less than 10 hives, you should be testing all of them. Hopefully everyone here today is more the commercial nature. If you've got 110, you should be testing, 48? I should know this. And that's the ratio we would like to see. But if you are testing additional sites and you're testing the lower ratio, again, we really want you to submit that data. So the next one is multi-field. So if you are doing drone uncapping and alcohol wash, you can select both options. And then obviously whether you found anything suspect. If you click no, you can just go to the last page. If you click yes, we really want you to ring the call center. We don't want to get fall through the cracks. You ring 132523 straight away, you'll be put straight through to one of our team and we'll walk you through it. There is some information that we'll come up to on how to take a photo, on how to take a sample if you do find something. So just a little earbud is basically all you need. Pop it in a jar, and then upload your photos. But again, just reinforcing, if you've got anything suspect, give the call center a call, 132523. And the last one is basically just your contact information. So it's just name, address, and some way we can contact you, your phone number and your email address. Your data is secure with us. We're not sharing it with any third parties. What happens now, though, once you submit a B123 survey form, you'll be emailed a copy of that form. So you can choose to use that how you see fit. So if you've applied for interstate travel, you can send that as your proof of testing for other jurisdictions. You might want to, whoever you're doing a pollination job for might want proof of testing before they let you on their orchard. This is how you can prove it. Or just pre-sale, change of ownership. Someone might have wanted you to test your hives before you're selling them. So if anyone wants more information on that, they can check our privacy policy. But yeah, just rest assured we're not sharing that data with anyone apart from the department. And I'm stealing Joe's slide here, but these are just the key things to remember basically. And the key points for industry, we need more beekeepers to join the fight. Like I've said before, we're not getting enough numbers at the moment. It's the commercial guys that can get us the numbers we need. Like I said, there's 780 people that tick the box that they're commercial in Australia, in Queensland. We need 500 unique entries. So if all the commercial guys just go out and do one round of testing, that'll get us there. We're not asking you to go out and test all your hives at that ratio. Do one like this 16 weeks, do another one next 16 weeks. But that's it, and open for questions.
Open for questions. Thank you, Rob. That was excellent as always. I'm going to throw it over to our beekeepers. Someone must have a question out there. I know that the lovely and talented QBA president, he's not so lovely sometimes. No, he's fantastic. Jacob, I believe, is online there somewhere. So yeah, please come forward. Unmute yourself if you've got any questions that you want to throw us. Here's a great opportunity. Please throw us a question. Crickets. I might just, maybe while we're waiting, Rob, to see if there's anything that's going to come through, do you just want to quickly take us over with the changes to the border last Friday as well, and what's happening in that space?
So yeah, the border was shut for a little bit longer than we originally anticipated, but it did open up last Friday. So now you can move bees from the GEZ or the blue zone in New South Wales. Live bees can come across. We're also started accepting applications for queen bees. Now we realise it's very late in the season and we might have missed this window, but Queensland is the first state to move in this respect. So we're trying to mainly plan for next season, and we're also trying to work with industry as well on trying to get some of those high value queens into Queensland as well, just in case potentially the border does shut again. So we're working with the other jurisdictions as well in New South Wales, mainly in Victoria and South Australia, to harmonise all our testing requirements. So all your level of testing will be the same for the three jurisdictions at the moment. It's only New South Wales that has that lower testing rate in terms of their mandated testing. You will see different numbers floating around, like I mentioned before, that you'll see 26 hives being tested. That is for people in the blue zone of New South Wales, and that's their mandated requirement. So that's not to do with moving interstate. All three jurisdictions, it is at 64 hives. So that's a different ratio again to what we've discussed. You can still get permits for moving equipment for irradiation from New South Wales to Stereotech in Queensland. You can also move, before you could move live bees, we already had permits in place for moving supers into Queensland, so that remains as well if people just want to get their top boxes off and get them in across the border without moving the whole hives. So honey changed very early in the piece. Originally you needed a permit to move honey. That's no longer the case. But I think that's probably got us covered. Like Danny mentioned, Victoria also followed suit on Wednesday this week, and South Australia is expected to go by, I think, the end of the first week of May, but don't hold me to that. It could be the second week. But yeah, we're trying to really be harmonised with all the eastern states and make sure that the border doesn't shut again. We're doing preparation for almond industry pollination, and what we want is to not shut the border again in future. We want to have contingency plans in place and make sure we're comfortable. We've got the procedures in place. We wouldn't have to have a state-wise shutdown. It would be a lot more specific and zonal depending on the risk. So depending on trace forward information, and again, commend New South Wales on their data sharing, and they've been very open when there has been a new detection in New South Wales, and we rely heavily on them for the trace forward information that we can make an assessment on where the border needs to be. So hopefully that answers your questions on that, but we will try and have a a separate session on permitting, because I know it is a hot button issue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I think a lot of our commercial guys have seen the activity, probably seen some of the New South Wales operators coming into Queensland in this past week. So certainly Jacob and I have fielded a few phone calls, I suppose. We've got some information. There he is. I knew that he couldn't hold back. We've got some information coming out later on this afternoon with regards to that situation, and pointing you in the direction of where you need to be going. But I think what's probably first and foremost, before I hand to Jacob, is that people really must understand that if you're making any plans for the immediate future or down the track, you need to start thinking now about what you need to be doing. Jacob.
I just wanted to say thanks to Danny and Rob for their time today on behalf of QBA, and I think it's been really informative, and hopefully we can.
Oh, we've lost him.
We've lost him. That is what I am very familiar with. Phone calls cutting in and out consistently. Jacob calling in and checking in. Jacob has actually been working and getting back to what he should be doing at this time of the year. So I've been steering the ship a little bit this past week, but he certainly checked in as soon as he was back in service. So I'll just put it out there again. I know that we've got a lot of people online. I can see some different names and some different backgrounds there. So does anyone have any questions that you want to throw out either at Danny or Rob or myself?
And I'll just say, if you prefer to do this in your own private forum, we're available at any time. We're here for beekeepers that want information. You can call the call centre to make contact, or you can email us at info@daf.qld.gov.au. We're happy to have these conversations, and especially when it comes to permitting as well, we'll take each one case by case, and we've got a designated permit officer and 2 APRI officers working on the program, and we can guide you through the process.
Yeah. I think I can see Nathan, you've unmuted. Do you want to throw your question out there?
I've got a quick question. I'm new to the commercial game, been in bees for a few years now. If a row is detected in Queensland, is it an instant eradication, or what's the go there? Is it that's my question.
It's a great question. Rob.
So I can sort of cover part of it, and Danny would be well versed in this too. So it would be a trigger of the current response plan, and it would trigger a review of the current response, and then there would be another. All the information would be gathered. There'd be analysis by the CCEPP, and they would determine if it's technically feasible to eradicate. So if it's a one-off, like some of you guys might be aware of why the border shut in a few months ago, and that was because of a unregulated movement around Taree. So if something like that happened into New South Wales, into Queensland or another jurisdiction, we could put a quick lid on it. We could do delimiting surveillance. There's no reason why that couldn't be incorporated into the program. But if you've got a lack of compliance and there's free movement of bees and it's not linked and untraceable, that would then be information that the CCPP would have to consider and decide if it was still technically feasible to eradicate.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of. I think probably what's important, Nathan, from industry's perspective, is that negative data really is our pathway. That if we had to experience a detection here in Queensland, the first and foremost thing, yes, it triggers that review of the response, but more so, we'll immediately be looking at the data, with government and with AHBIC, and having a look at that region where the pickup has been identified, and to better understand what bee populations are there at the moment, and what surveillance activity has been conducted. So that's where things like next week's subjects, all about record keeping, and yes, continuing that surveillance targets as April, August and December are the might months to remember. I won't sing. It's Friday afternoon. I need a few stiff drinks before I do that. But look, the most important thing is if everyone's on board with this, and getting on board, it means doing your test, reporting your results. It really does give us that level of confidence that if something did happen to pop up here in Queensland, it's the sooner we can get onto it, the sooner we can contain it. And, trust me, I will be lobbying very, very hard. We've done that for the past 10 months. We've had very robust conversations with all parties. I'm sure that Rob can hand on his heart and say, yes, the QBA has been very passionate. There is not a question that we haven't thrown out there. So, but yeah, please, where you can, if you can get in, do your tests, report your results. It makes our job a hell of a lot easier when we're having to have that debate at a very top level. And, we've got data in the system. We can say the guys have checked, regionalised, let's go. So that's where it's at.
Yeah, the last
Great
thing we
answer,
want to
thank
do
you.
is have a long-term standstill. So I can't guarantee there'll be no standstill if we got a detection in Queensland, but what we can say is, like Joe said, if we've got negative data from multiple regions and we've got valid trace forward information that isolates a specific time window, we can show that other zones are free of the mite and hopefully not restrict movement there. So the more data we have, the easier it will be to allow that free movement to continue. But obviously based on risk, and if the risk is there and we need to have a standstill, there'll be a standstill. So
Thanks, guys.
No worries. I can see Bano. Bano is one of our executives on the QBA board. Fire away, Bano.
How you doing? I would just like to let everybody know that it's that important that if we all do our testing, if you happen to find any problem, you must speak up, because trying to keep it a secret is only going to make it worse long term down the track. If you do find a mite, there's going to be more. So we need anyone that does detect them to own up straight away, so we can at least get on top of it. You can't get on top of it if people keep secrets. That's all.
Yeah, the only way is early detection. If we can get into it straight away, we can contain it, we can delimit it. But if you sit on it for 6 months and then it escapes into the wild population, then your neighbours are going to get it and then it's uncontained. So, yeah, early detection is key.
Absolutely. Have we got anyone else circulating out there that's unmuting? I can see
thought
Rick
I saw something in the
Jensen out
chat.
there.
Was there a question in the chat?
Question. I know that there's been a lot of content. I just want to say thanks to Larissa in the background. You've been popping up a whole heap of really useful information. Here we go. So Rick has asked, can Rob tell us about the magic number of hives to alcohol wash if you own 1,000 hives or more? Now, here's a tricky one, Rob. We're not talking about your RBE. We're talking about your apiary side, aren't we?
It's based on your apiary sites, not you as a holistic enterprise. If you did have 1,000 hives in one site, the magic number is 62. That's the number that the biometricians have come up with and said there's no point testing more than 62. We realise beekeepers don't have 1,000 hives in one site. You're going to be broken into loads. Basically, if you're in a different geographical location, that's a separate apiary to us. And that's what I mentioned before. If you test one of those apiary locations at the appropriate rate, and then if you want to test the other locations at your own leisure and still submit that data. So yeah, if you've broken it up into smaller loads, it's going to be 48 over it's under 100. 62 is the magic number if you did have more than 250 at any given site, which is probably unlikely for the way most beekeepers run their businesses. Yeah.
And I think furthermore to that, next week we're going to be introducing and stepping through border permits and what they're actually going to look like, what you need to be doing now. So that's particularly relevant for any of the guys that are thinking about doing the almond run. You need to be showing evidence that you've been doing regular and consistent testing, really since the detection of Varroa. So your records need to be absolutely Mickey Mouse. Ag Victoria have made it pretty damn clear that everything has got to be ticking the box for them to even consider issuing a permit. So, if you do the hard yards now, you're going to get there in the end. Just to reiterate on Rob's message as well about the testing ratios, here at the QBA, we've got in excess of about 400 members at the moment. If we just had each of those members that are running larger populations of bees go out and test one site, get those thresholds. Yes, continue to test the rest of your sites. You should be looking in every single one of your sites. But if you can just target one of those loads at the moment, if you can do more in the numbers, I will kiss you. I will literally kiss you. No, I won't kiss you. I'll buy you a drink at the conference. But yeah, please get out there and do whatever you can. I might just do one more final wrap around the grounds just to see if there's
just to add on to that too, Joe, just what I mentioned before, if you are testing a lower threshold, make sure you mark your hives and test different hives next time. So there are other ways that we can still get to that magic number. If you're not capable of testing them all in one go, mark the hives, test different hives next time. So yeah, and like I said, just because you haven't done that ratio doesn't mean don't report it. We want every hive reported that you've checked.
She's looking at one particular person here.
I know who you're talking about.
We know who we're talking about. But look, bigger picture, thank you so much to Danny and Rob. Thank you to the team behind the scenes from Biosecurity Queensland. I've really got to give credit to these guys. They are there evening, nighttime, early mornings. They're fielding questions from us all the time. The conversation is constant. So there is a huge body of work that's going on to prevent Varroa and protect the state from Varroa. So thank you for everyone's efforts. Next week, jump on in, join us at 4 o'clock again. I do plan Rob's going to be online again, and we'll probably have Dean potentially from the permitting team. We'll just have to see how that rolls through, but we'll do what we can to get that done, and I will endeavour to secure some speakers. I'm heading next Agriculture Victoria so that we can have a look at what their permits are actually going to look like, and better understand how we need to be preparing if we are making that decision to travel. Alternatively, I'm also looking to get some support from New South Wales DPI as well for guys that are considering going down to New South Wales. So please join us. Thank you so much. And one last little ticket for me. If you haven't got your QBA conference tickets, get online and get them. Every day, Steph and I are starting to see the registration numbers go up. We've got capacity for 400 people at the conference, and we've really brought together a group of very dynamic speakers that are presenting on topics incredibly relevant at the moment. So please grab your tickets where you can. If you don't know how to do that, email me or message me. Do it through the Commercial Beekeepers page if you want to. But yeah, that's all I've got to say. So thank you so much. Wrapping up at 5:01. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and a lovely weekend. And any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat here. Email me, email Rob, or email Danny, but Danny's probably got to go and try and catch up. We're all catching up. Thanks, team. Bye for now.
Hello, Queensland beekeepers. My name is Cameron Jack. I'm a professor at the University of Florida, and my primary focus is controlling varroa, small hive beetles, and any other pest or pathogen that could be ailing your bees. So I'm excited to be able to be with you in June, and I look forward to meeting you and hopefully to see and talk about some varroa-free beekeeping. We'll talk to you soon.